silenci, però encara no comencem.
There's a lot of silence. We're not.
Bona tarda. Good afternoon. Comencem
Good
ara sí que
afternoon.
sí.
Let's
Anem
begin
agafant
right away.
seient, anem agafant el
Let's
darrer cafè,
be
el darrer
seated,
croissant,
grab
ara
our
sí.
last coffee
Algú que s'apari al
and
fons que entri, que no
pastries.
mosseguem.
If you're
I
out in the
engeguem
back, you
aquesta
can come in.
conversa amb la Ruha Benjamin,
And
que
we
en
will have this
realitat
conversation
ens
with
hem
Ruha
tirat la
Benjamin,
troca bastant més. Això començàvem,
which
anem
in
a fer una
fact,
trobada amb
the
la
idea
Ruha
was to have
per parlar
a
d'aquest
meeting
tema,
with her
però
to
hem
speak of
començat a
these
parlar
matters, but then we
amb
started
altres
speaking with
entitats,
other
amb amistats, i hem vist que el tema
associations and
donava
friends,
molt més
and
de
we
si,
saw the
i que era una
topic
molt
was
bona
really
excusa per
extensive, and it was a
reconnectar-nos
good
i
excuse
per
to get
qüestionar-nos
together
sobre
again
què
and
és això del racisme digital a
wonder,
casa
what
nostra.
is this digital racism
I em
all about
preguntava, per
here?
què ens
And
costa
I
tant parlar
was
de
asking,
racisme?
why is it so complicated
Per
to
què ens
speak of
costa tant?
racism?
Doncs
Why
mireu,
is it
fa
so difficult?
aproximadament
And
5
so
anys, a
5
la
years
Fundació
ago,
Bofill vam
in
fer un
Fundació
projecte.
Bofill, we had a project.
Ja veureu que aniré traient llibrets i coses.
You'll see
Vam
me
fer un
taking
projecte que
out
es deia
books.
Som Crítics, del
It
qual va
was a
sorgir
project
aquesta
called
magnífica
We Are
publicació,
Critical. We had this
en el qual parlàvem sobre
booklet
els
we
temes
published,
controvertits.
and we
Llavors vaig
discussed
aprendre que
controversial
no en parlem
matters.
gaire per 3 motius.
And we
El primer,
discussed
perquè
that
ens
we don't talk
remouen,
about them too often
perquè ens
for 3
incomoden,
reasons. One, because
perquè
they're
ens fan
uncomfortable, they're
qüestionar-nos el
inconvenient.
nostre dia a
They
dia,
make us
la
question
nostra feina,
our day-to-day
el que fem a
life, our
casa,
work, what we
i
do at
sobretot
home,
qüestionar-nos a nosaltres
and
mateixos. Això és
ourselves,
el més
basically,
complicat.
which is the most
Les nostres
complicated
creences,
thing,
les
our
nostres
beliefs,
decisions.
our
I això
emotions.
no sempre és fàcil i
And
no
this
sempre ens
is
agrada.
not always
Seria una
easy,
primera
not
raó.
always pleasant. So
La
that on the
segona
one hand.
és
Secondly,
que a vegades tenim por d'expressar o dir allò que
sometimes
pensem.
we're afraid
Por
to
al
say
rebuig, a que
what we
qualsevol
think.
ens digui el que dir.
We
Potser
are
ens
afraid
falta
others won't
coneixement,
like it.
ens
Maybe we
falta
don't have enough
expertesa,
knowledge or expertise.
I això també ens pot generar
And
una sensació
this
de que
could
no estem a
also
l'alçada
make us think that
d'aquesta
maybe
temàtica. Això el
we
primer.
should not be
I
discussing the
potser
topic,
tampoc a casa
myself
nostra o a
as well.
l'escola ens han ensenyat
Or
gaire a tenir
the
diàleg
third
sobre temes
explanation is
controvertits.
because
Per tant,
sometimes,
encara menys
maybe in our
ens
education at
sentim
home,
fora
in
del
schools,
confort.
we were not taught
I una
how to
tercera
discuss
raó és que
controversial
potser
things.
tampoc tenim gaire
And
clares les
the
solucions.
last reason, maybe
som
we are not
persones
clear about the
compromeses,
solutions. Since
no
we
ens
are very
agrada
committed
assenyalar
people,
el
we
repte
don't
si
like
no tenim
to
una solució,
point
una solució a
at the
vegades
challenge
màgica,
unless we
o
have
les
a
coses
solution,
claríssimes.
or
Per tant,
unless
com
we're
no
very
sabem les
clear
solucions,
about
a
things.
vegades
And
no ens
since
atrevim
maybe we
ni a
don't have the
posicionar
solution,
els
we
reptes o els
don't
problemes,
dare
no?
consider
I aquestes tres coses
the
ens generen,
challenge. And so these
aquesta
things
incomoditat, aquesta
make us
incomoditat inevitable
uncomfortable.
quan parlem de
And it's something we can't
coneixement.
help when we think of
Però
critical
la bona
thinking.
notícia és
But
que hi ha
the good
remei.
news
Això té cura.
is that there
I
is
és
something we can do
l'exercici del
about it,
pensament crític.
and that is to
És
carry out
l'exercici del
critical
pensament crític.
thinking.
Quan vam fer aquesta
And
publicació,
when we
ja el
published
vam
this,
reivindicar, però
we
ara també,
also
amb tot
said,
el
and
trasbals que
now
ens
as
suposen les
well,
tecnologies digitals,
with all the
els
problems
qüestionaments a la
entailed by
democràcia, etcètera,
digital
és més important
technologies
que mai
and
exercir
democracy,
el
it's
pensament
more
crític en
important than
espais
ever to
com en el
have
que
critical
estem
thinking in
ara.
spaces like where we are
Llavors,
now.
avui parlem
And so
d'una
today
nova
we
forma
will
de
speak of a
racisme,
new
de
form of
racisme
racism,
digital,
digital
així li hem
racism.
dit,
This is
racisme
what we call the
digital.
event, digital
I
racism.
ho
And
fem des d'aquí, des del hub social.
we're doing it from the social hub in this, these premises that we have full of ideas and projects and social activism. And we are here. We know you're following us through the streaming, and we appreciate that you do your best to follow us from different places. And we will appreciate that you are also part, even if you're not here present, through the label Digital Racism, through the YouTube chat, or also through X. If you wish to, you don't have to, okay?
I quan parlem de
And
racisme
when we
digital,
speak
pot semblar que és un tipus de racisme
digital
com més
racism,
suau,
one would
menys-
think it's a little
menys agressiu,
milder, not so
menys,
aggressive.
trasbalsant. Però tota la recerca
But
ens
in
està dient
fact,
que és un tipus de
research
racisme
shows that
molt
it
perillós.
is very
Primer de
dangerous,
tot,
in fact.
per la seva
Firstly,
viralitat.
because of how
La
viral it is,
velocitat de les xarxes
the
socials fa que
speed
una notícia
of social
falsa
media
o que
may
actes de
make fake
discriminació
news or discriminatory
circulin a una
events
velocitat altíssima i que
to
sigui
move around very
incontrolable
quickly,
mesurar la
and
seva
it's
capacitat d'influir en les
uncontrollable
persones.
to measure how much it can
segon és
influence on
l'anonimat.
people. Secondly,
Ens atrevim una miqueta a dir coses a l'espai
anonymity.
digital que no diríem al carrer o que no diríem
If we're anonymous,
en el
we
nostre
dare
dia a dia
say
a una
things that
persona
we
o a una
wouldn't do
amic, no? Llavors,
face
aquesta
to
també
face.
sensació d'impunitat,
And
de
so
que
this
l'espai
sense of
digital
impunity
tot
that
val,
digital
que és una selva
space
amb
allows you to do
conseqüències,
anything, there are
també
no
fa que el racisme
consequences,
digital sigui
makes
molt
digital
i molt
racism
perillós.
very dangerous
I el
as well.
tercer és la ubiquitat.
And thirdly,
Ubiquitat vol dir que el tema
ubiquity
digital ens envolta
means that
les 24
the
hores
digital
a tots els espais on som.
sphere
També
surrounds
els
us
infants i joves,
24/7,
a les xarxes
young,
socials,
the
les
youth
plataformes que
and children
utilitzen,
too,
a
in
l'escola,
everything
fora
we
de
do,
l'escola, o
in
fins i
school,
tot a la seva
outside of
habitació
school,
tancats.
even in their
Poden patir
bedrooms.
situacions de discriminació.
Kids
Per
could
tant, és un
suffer
gran enemic molt
discrimination.
invisible.
So it's a very
Molt invisible.
invisible
Per això hem
enemy.
cregut
And
que
so
era
we
també
thought
important parlar-ne.
it was
I
important
això
to
ho veiem en
discuss
coses
it.
molt
And this we
quotidianes,
see
no és
in
futurisme del que
things,
parlem avui,
it's
no
not
és Black Mirror,
anything
el que parlem avui
outrageous.
és de
What we will talk about is
biaixos en les respostes que li dona
biases
la
in
intel·ligència artificial
the
al teu infant,
answers that artificial
és
intelligence gives your
l'exposició
kids,
ininterrompuda
constant
d'infants
exposure
racialitzats
of
a espais
racialized
d'odi
children to
discriminatius,
spaces
o
of hatred
fins i tot
and
les bretxes
discrimination,
digitals,
or
no? I
even the
aquí em
digital
vull aturar una
gaps.
miqueta.
And
Les
here I
bretxes
want to
digitals
stop because the
que
digital
també
gap
tenen una dimensió
also
racial.
has a racial side to it. Recently, in November,
vam publicar això,
we
la cara i la
published
creu de les
this,
competències digitals, i ens fèiem ressò de la
the different
publicació
sides
d'IFU,
of
que vendria a ser
digital
com el PISA
competences.
de les competències digitals, i el que hem vist és que
And we
la
saw
raó
that
d'origen,
the
a l'haver nascut o no a Catalunya,
reason of having
condiciona
been born in
terriblement els
Catalonia or
resultats
not
de competències
really
digitals dels
determines
estudiants catalans.
the
En aquest cas,
digital
era
competences of
a
Catalan
segon d'ESO.
students.
El
In this
resultat era
case,
d'una
in
diferència d'un 20%
this,
de
in
diferència entre infants nascuts a Catalunya i no nascuts
13-year-olds.
a
And there was a
Catalunya.
huge
Una diferència que
difference
està per sobre fins i tot
on the
de la
children,
bretxa
whether
de
they were
gènere,
born in
que
Catalonia
també
or not.
apareix important
Also,
en l'estudi,
with
però
a
no en la
gender
mateixa mesura
gap
que ho
also
és
appearing in the
la
study,
raó
but
d'origen.
not so important as the source of where these kids were from. And in our foundation and our associations that organized this meeting today, want to discuss that anti-racism cannot be approached without understanding the digital competences and technologies and how they have an influence on our day-to-day. We cannot fight against racism without seeing how technology is impacted. And in the foundation and the project of digital equity, we cannot understand digital equity without introducing the notion of institutional racism in the systems, also in educational systems. And so I was saying that there are three reasons why you might feel uncomfortable or insecure. And this is why today we have with us people who know very much. We have Ruha Benjamin, who will have a conversation with Liliana Arroyo. Also, in this afternoon session, we will have Bernat Ferrer, who will present local projects, Kilometer Zero, working on technologies and socio-educational inequalities. And this is the starting point of this session on digital racism. And I would like to invite the speakers now. You'll see that when you are surrounded by very interesting and knowledgeable people, it all becomes a little easier. So let's have with us Nuria Vallesperis, sociologist with a PhD, specialized
M'he quedat a mitges. Sociòloga i doctora especialitzada en estudis de la ciència i la tecnologia.
Studies in science and technology. Currently, she's a scientist in the Institute researching artificial intelligence in the CSIC in Spain. So, here we have more. Núria Sabater.
És mestra de primària.
She's a primary teacher.
Semblen uns premis, pràcticament.
It's like an award ceremony.
És mestra de primària i
She is a primary teacher, and she runs Maria Fortuny School in Reus, a reference in digital and educational opportunities, also presides an institution on education and technology.
El tercer integrant d'aquesta
Then
taula
we have
és el Mohamed
El
president de l'Associació Azahara de
presiding
Salt,
the Azahara Association
una
in
entitat
Salt,
que
an association that
treballa amb
works
eines digitals
with digital
com a palanca
tools
d'oportunitats.
as a lever
I
for
no diré més
opportunities.
coses del Mohamed
And
perquè
I won't
és
say more
emprenedor,
about
és
him. He's an
comunicador, és
entrepreneur,
activista,
an
i moltes
activist,
altres coses que
expert in communication, and many
també,
other things.
doncs,
And
Judit
as well,
Membrives,
Judith
que és
Membrives,
responsable
who is in charge.
No defalliu. És responsable d'intel·ligència artificial i drets humans de la
Artificial
FEDE. També és
intelligence
membre
and
fundadora
human rights in FEDE,
d'Algo
also
Rights,
founding member of
una
Algo
comunitat
Rights,
d'activistes compromesos en
a
la
community
protecció dels
of
drets humans en els
activists
espais
committed to
digitals,
human rights
especialment
in digital
en
spaces,
l'àmbit de
especially
la intel·ligència
in
artificial.
artificial intelligence.
Jo ordeno
Wonderful.
la biblioteca
So,
i comencem.
let's begin right away with
Havíem dit que era una mica
what we
sorpresa,
said
però us
was going to be a bit of a
proposava, aquí
surprise.
teniu
But
aigua,
my
us proposava que
suggestion
comencéssim
is that we begin
amb un flash de 15 segons.
with 15 seconds
Podem
each.
començar per allà perquè el Mohamed
Maybe
no
we
ho
could
sabia.
start from
Llavors,
there,
així
because
tens
Mohamed
15
didn't know, and
reaccions.
so
Amb un
we'll give him
flash
a few
de
seconds
15
to react. So
segons, de
15
com us
seconds,
sentiu
please. Tell us how you
amb aquesta
feel
temàtica. Més enllà de
speaking of these
treballar des
matters.
d'aquí, com us sentiu? Us
How do
incomoda?
you
Esteu
feel?
a
Does it
gust?
make you
Què
uncomfortable? Do you
us
feel
ve quan parlem
comfortable?
de
What
racisme digital?
comes to you when you hear about digital racism? I feel outside of my comfort zone because I don't know about racism or digital racism. And because speaking in front of an audience is not something I feel comfortable with. I feel that I have so much to learn about this, that I've researched a little bit on, and with the privilege of being a white woman studying this, I think there's still so much to do, and we have to be so very aware of the situation around us. I think I just am very happy and very keen on learning a lot. I have the imposter syndrome as a white or racialized white person, although my expertise is artificial intelligence and how it perpetuates structures of power. So yeah, I feel like I'm the imposter, and I also have a stomachache for everything that's happening in Palestine. I think this is a necessary thing to discuss. I've experienced it since I was very young, and it's needed because it's getting worse. I think hatred is becoming professional, and I think it's important we discuss it. Thank you so much to the four, because thinking like this, recognizing our weaknesses is very nice, and this is what we want to work on today. Núria, we have a set of different questions, which doesn't mean that you cannot speak with one another, disagree with one another. Núria, let's speak of racist algorithms. Up to what point are really reflecting the society we are in? Or are they like an accelerator of the discriminations in the network? Okay, let me turn this question around. When you suggested this question, I was thinking, and I looked at what sentences or what words could represent what I wanted to explain. Lucy Satzman says that technology is not designing physical things, but rather practices and possibilities. And I think that maybe we should think of the algorithms. What do they make possible, and what practices do they go along with? We know, and in racial discrimination and in all forms of discrimination, that the algorithms reproduce and intensify forms of inequality because they're trained with biased data, and so the algorithms here would be racist. But even if they're not trained with biased data, they reproduce and intensify forms of inequality because they identify patterns that are present in our society. A society with many cases of inequality, and so they intensify these injustices, structural injustices. And so I think it's not right to speak of digital racism, because what happens if we solve everything that has to do with the digital sphere? There are structural discriminations that would not disappear. So I thought it would be interesting to, if we speak of digital racism, to think of two things. On the one hand, what's happening with the introduction of artificial intelligence systems in school and in education, this on the one hand, and then everything that happens in the social media. In social media, especially amongst the youth and the children. In school, artificial intelligence in education, I think the headline would be this narrative on the potential of artificial intelligence in education, which we don't know much about, so careful. And thinking of the four great areas: artificial intelligence in school, personalization, support to teachers, educational management, and facial recognition and recognition of emotions, which I won't discuss because it shouldn't be. But the other forms of introduction of artificial intelligence in school, if we don't apply regulatory and control and audits and such mechanisms, they would contribute to further discrimination, because they're based on identifying past patterns. And in school, the goal would be, I think, Philip Miriet the philosopher says that schools is the experience of caring for the future, and so breaking these forms of inequality and stereotypes. So this is the first warning signal. And then social media, we know that social media are an amplifier, a loudspeaker of racist speeches and far-right speeches. And this is dramatic. And it seems as if nothing good is coming in the near future. So I'm just going to leave it there for now, and we can continue later.
No, that's fine. It's fine because now we can go on to the other Nuria and, well, to hear about what is going on at schools, because it seems that these are really important changes taking place and very complex. But the truth be told is that children nowadays are living with AI day in and day out. So, Nuria, the Maria Fortun, in this task of difficult balance that you have, yeah? Because on the one hand, you have to protect and accompany children with these challenges, especially the ones that most suffer this discrimination. But then at the same time, you must be a school of digital opportunities. So what are you learning? We are learning a lot indeed. It's not an easy job at all. Our school, well, some years ago, we decided that precisely because of the students we have that have so many lacks and needs, we decided we would not make that divide or that gap even larger. That's why we have learned and trained to be able to accompany all these young people in the discovery of digital technology and tools, them and their families. But what is happening now? We're discovering there's a problem. A kid comes along and says that he thinks, that somebody's written something critical of him in a social medium, and then we act. But that's why I said I have so much to learn, because this should not happen in a school. At school, we should anticipate this. I should have worked with this student for him or her to be aware of what is racism, of what is hatred, of what is something that he or she should not tolerate, and I should have explained what steps he or she should have taken to feel well, to feel open, to talk about these things. Okay, and so then that we had been able to accompany the students so that these 12 or 13 or 14-year-olds know what to do, because they don't know what to do when they feel attacked in this way, because this is a direct attack in the media or simply reading content. Sometimes we ask them to look for information in the internet, they do it, and they sometimes find things that, they're not even aware of the huge bias that content has. And in our school, well, we have people from all over, yes, from loads of nationalities, and we are fortunate in that we have worked already on these topics. But the school next door, it's a kind of semi-private school with low numbers of racialized students. They need it more than we do, because they are not aware of everything that they are digesting, all those messages that are being addressed to them that seem innocent are terribly racist. So honestly, schools, we have to act to prevent. So, and every time then that we do things with our students, we have to make sure that we've made it go through the filter of feminism, anti-racism, and really and truly, what you were saying at the beginning, critical thought is something that one learns, okay? Young kids are not critical, they believe anything, but if very slowly and gradually in all the different educational stages we work on this, they will be able to discover and discriminate. So that's it from me. And do you work with families? Well, for us, it's essential, crucial, because the families, are those outside school that make the decisions for these people. I work with kids from 3 to 12 years of age. So when they're at home, they might be on YouTube. Who knows? If the mother and father are not aware of everything that one can find in YouTube, well, then we're going to be having a problem, aren't we? So yes, we do count with families. Most of them are Muslim, and at school, we have been able to generate or to create a safe environment to be able to talk about these issues. We have invited experts, not only on race and gender, and experts who come who have opened up a bit, and got these people to understand some things. For example, if I let my daughter be, 1 hour watching YouTube videos, I mean, who can she get to know about? What can she get to see? So the role of families is essential, and especially that, I mean, obviously these families want to accompany their kids the best way possible, but sometimes they don't have time, or they don't even have the possibility because they might be fighting just to get something to eat or to protect, the possibility of housing, I mean, basic needs. So here we're going to be creating a social problem if we don't deal with this. I mean, schools are there to help with this too. When I say school, I'm including everyone. Yeah, I mean, social integration technicians, social workers, everyone. I'm fortunate at our school we have them all. And that's it. So yes, we must all go together, family and experts and kids. Yeah, well now let's go to the community space. Moha, from Azahara, your association, it's not only technology that you work on, but you also, you are there in the community. What are you doing to accompany people who feel they are suffering racism, something that you yourself, you say you've experienced it. So what do you do? What can be done? Yeah, we are. Azahara is our association in Salt, some kilometers away from Barcelona. You know that it's a highly, kind of 85% of the people are migrants. But that's terrible because young people already get the label of migrant and also of being a social danger, a social hazard. So really, to be able to progress socially is frankly very difficult. And unfortunately, people talk about the town Salt always negatively and never positively, because let me tell you, beyond these difficulties I've just mentioned, I mean, obviously these people came because they came from precarious situations. They tend to concentrate as well in a small area. I mean, the population density of Salt is quite irregular. It happens in other places. I mean, there are some neighborhoods not far from here where there is, a very kind of high density, especially of racialized persons. So, as I was saying, it's the labeling, the labeling of identities that happens. And we realize that there are many young people that we work with at the association, and for the simple fact of them being migrants or for the simple fact of belonging to this social and economic environment, the only out-of-school opportunities that they have as a possibility are related to, what's most typical, I mean, kind of board games, I don't know. It's all very nice, but, simply because they belong to a specific niche, they are forced to do specific out-of-school activities very much identified with their origin. They cannot really choose. And we realize at our association, as we ourselves have lived this reality. I mean, we are all, I myself, I was born in Morocco. Then when I was a kid, we came here to Catalonia. And, all those of us at the organization are people from these contexts, and we created the NGO because we want to stop perpetuating these roles, and we want social interventions to be different, because sometimes they chronify everything and they chronify narratives, and on top they're very patronizing. So what we did was we took the reality that we have and we created a project that has to do with training in robotics and programming for young migrant origin people. But not from a purely a standpoint of seeing technology as an aim, as in you have to learn how to use this technology, but rather to get young people to understand how important it is to program, what you can do with robotics, but also with this social accompaniment, because other than programming and robotics that we started with a group of 500 young people and then eventually changed and made it become a different type of teaching, we have also created another program that includes a special person that is a link between the family and the young person. Because, listen, unfortunately, there are so many prejudices that have to do with technology. Many families think that young girls don't have to do programming or robotics because they see this as an out-of-school activity only for boys and young men. So as well as training in robotics and programming, we have had to do a lot of social work with the families. It's been quite deep, and not only with migrant families, by the way. This gender bias is present everywhere, never mind the origin. So we have done a lot of work accompanying, yes, a lot of social work, and now I do think that we have managed to get to a point in programming and robotics in which people see it as something, yes, that somebody can learn. And we also have reference persons, because of that initial group of 500, we took 20, and those would be accompanied from the in the last 3 years of their formal education to see if the project indeed meant that eventually they selected, university studies that were scientific. Let me tell you, nearly 70%, yes, ended up going for scientific and technological degrees at the university. Because not only did we organize those courses, we also did summer camps. It's all kind of slow. It's not kind of saying, listen, I'm going to train you in robotics and programming. It's a bit more than that. And you have to think about strategy, and you have to think about, the social fabric. It's not only instrumental, teaching them how to program and how to kind of make a robot and use it. No, it goes much further. It has to do with attitude and aptitude. So, Moha, how do we go about this? When we talk about digital gaps or divides, there are three, access, devices, connectivity, but then you have another, which is opportunity. I mean, that's more difficult. You might have a computer, you might have had some training to use specific software, but your life hasn't changed, and your opportunities are the same as they were. So what can we do about this third divide, of expectations, identities? How do you improve someone's life? Well, you have to work with companies, right? Yeah. You have to make companies aware of the fact that they should also recruit migrant persons and persons belonging to this reality, because quite often there's racism in selection processes. That's why I said that our work is not only, a third sector type of work. Schools have to work on this. Universities must. We've also involved the University of Girona, close to Salt. We've involved the entrepreneur associations. And slowly and gradually, we have made it normal, for young people to see opportunities as something possible, and making sure that the companies also know that they can recruit these young people. And you need communication strategies. I mean, young people need to see references, people like them who, yes, have been successful. So that's what we did. We organized, we selected some people as showcases, we did some videos. I remember the first action we carried out were some young kids saying, I'm doing robotics and programming because I imagine I'll work as X. And then the video went on to get another person saying, I was you as a kid, and look at me, I've made it. And these videos and, well, the advertising we did on the basis of them, it's very good, because anything that has to do with training and education in technology and digital skills goes beyond this digital divide. It goes on to vulnerability, the classical vulnerabilities, and also social polarization. I mean, that is something happening, right? The climate crisis, anything that has to do with the crisis and the environmental issues that young people are worried about, and also inequalities that are happening because of this polarization and because of this, this environment in which there's so much hate right now. So it's not only digital. It's not only a digital divide. Thank you, Moha, for enriching. Can I add something? Yes, please do. Please do. Don't fear. Feel at home. Yeah, when you were telling us about the different divides, digital divides, I mean, I don't know anything at all about racism, but maybe we should talk about another digital divide, which is it's impossible not to be connected. And I'm thinking of young people and teenagers, there's nowhere where they can disconnect. And I'm starting to see that, I don't know, it's only through financial and economic resources and through family support that there can be leisure options that are not digital. Really, I'm getting this intuition, young people, and it's always all the time. It's digital, digital, digital. Everything that's offered is always digital. So what to do not to be digital? Well, it's a bit like fast food, isn't it? I mean, it's what directly affects the more vulnerable people, right? Because they don't have access to better food. You might have, organic kind of food, but it's much more expensive, and then access is an issue. I don't know. These young people live technology also as something conditioning their lives, and it's not only disconnection, but rather the connection is healthy, okay? And for that to happen, it's good that they know how it works, how what people do about the use of these technologies. For example, migrant women use the technology very specifically. They use streaming. Migrant women, the friends of my mother herself, they spend all day connected to streaming, live events. They started with YouTube, but now what they do, they home and they kind of connect, a whole large group of people through a streaming connection. But young people, for example, what they do is, no, they use TikTok or other things. So it's not so much, whether they connect or not, but rather understanding how they use this public area of digital tools to be there and to generate content that is valuable content, quality content, because the references there are self-managed. Yeah, indeed. Well, this is the social and educational discussion, right, of so many hours spent in front of a screen. And what research is telling us that it's not so much a digital divide or not using whatever well, is who's with you and how do you see this? Yeah, there's the difference. Are you accompanied or are you on your own when you are connected to a screen? This is what we're going to be dealing with in coming years because it's at the very crux of the matter in education. Judith, we don't forget you. We're not forgetting you, really, promise. We were talking a lot about digital well-being, but now we wanted to tackle with you something else, which has to do more with the legal framework. So this feel of impunity, of digital racism that we mentioned, why is it happening? Has it not been legislated? Or yes, it's part of the legal framework, but we don't use it and we're not responsible because the European Commission has gone, for the AI Act. There are also a series of laws and bills in Catalonia, so things have been done. But we don't know whether maybe everything has been legislated and it's not being implemented, or could you tell us?
There is very much legislation, yes. European legislation is not seen in terms of fundamental rights or maintaining the status quo, because what European legislation wants to favor is safe digital environments. And this word safe does not mean protecting human rights or possible vulneration of human rights, but rather it's a framework established by the status quo, which determines what the safety means and what it means to, as a user, not as a technology developer, to be safe in this digital environment. And I'm saying this because my perspective is quite specific. I defend a specific perspective. And we have different things here. We have European legislation like the Digital Service Act, Digital Markets Act, that is focused on the fact that great technological companies have to take into account that are controlling the whole debate and technological market and decide how this technology is created in a very specific point on Earth, in our planet, which is important because technology, as she said, as Nuria said, basically makes it possible or includes relationships of power, and from there creates new realities, new spaces for interaction, or new spaces in which rights are vulnerated. So what Europe does is to try to do something so that this isn't the far west that the United States, we are told it is. And it has legislation, the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, and... Oops, microphone. Yes, this is the European Commission, not liking what you're saying. Yes, I know. When I speak, always strange things happen. So what the European Commission or the EU is trying to do, and the EU, don't forget, is a framework to regulate a specific market. It's not a space that looks for the defense of specific rights. The purpose is to try to generate as much harmony as possible between the regulation of the different states in order to make this a common economic market that would be interesting for corporations. So looking to make responsible companies for these vulnerations. And so what is happening now in the geopolitical situation? This also has an impact, naturally, on how these regulations are implemented. And regulations that were approved last year that we were just starting to implement, like the artificial intelligence regulations that had to forbid facial recognition, biometric recognition, and emotions recognition. Before implementing it 100%, there are already amendments to it. We're waiting for the omnibus package to cut down things that were approved just 8 months ago. And so, are we living in anarchy? No. But I don't think that we could wait for the regulation to protect us from certain vulnerations or to protect communities that are already more vulnerable because of the impact of these technologies, because everything that's happening geopolitically doesn't seem to be that regulation will save us from that. Also, we have the Charter of the Rights of Children and the rights of infinite groups, and these are just charters. Basically, they're non-binding, sorry. No legal binding. Basically, what they do is determine a position, expressing we would like that in the digital sphere, the rights are approached in this way, that they're not violated in this way. But these declarations of intentions, which are wonderful, unless they come with, on the one hand, budgets to implement mechanisms so that the charters have some validity, or so that they become a reality in schools, companies, and in every scope of society, and the deployment in the regulatory framework. Apart from that, it's just best wishes, and it's just an expression of best intentions, when the time for best intentions is a little bit foregone. Very interesting what you're speaking about, the security of European consumers. Your perspective is interesting. Why don't we move to the open part of the session? And I have to say that I would be very brief here. We had intended now to have a more relaxed dialogue on proposals, and we've heard many things. So the idea was now with hopeful activism, we'd like to say, what do we ask of our administrations, our associations, or ourselves? Speaking of this responsibility, if Judith says, don't think that we're going to be saved. So how do we save ourselves? What can we do? And what should the administrations do, or other institutions? So as we get these answers, why don't you in the audience think of your questions or proposals? Who would like to take the floor? I can. Proposals for the administration, I would ask for so many things. First, less prohibition, more educating, less regulation, because prohibition is useless and we don't learn from our mistakes. It's true that children 2 or 3 years of age don't need screens, but I mean, they encounter them in their lives. So why don't we educate them? Why don't we accompany families so that they know how to face this new situation? I mean, the world has changed. We have to adapt to the new reality. I mean, artificial intelligence will not disappear. It's here to stay. We don't have to use ChatGPT all day. We can use our brains, but if we have something that can help us, why not use it? But very much education for teachers, because I think we're all swimming in a world in which we don't know all the potentials nor the dangers to do things as we should be doing. Many teachers are looking at the reports to see how to improve, how to personalize learning without taking into account that you feed it so many data and you're feeding the monster, right? So training and do your homework. That's why we elected them, right? So, I mean, if you're running the thing, then get to work. How important to introduce anti-racism in the educational digitalization. I mean, the past 3 years, 2 years, we're setting the grounds of the digital strategies of the center, and if I'm not mistaken, not much has been done, so very important. Thank you, Nuria. I would say we should rethink all the framework of digital competences that is thought of from the user rather than trying to understand a more structural thing of who is creating these technologies, what's the biology behind these technologies, what operations lie behind these technologies, and have a more critical perspective towards technology. I think that children should learn that the cloud is not a cloud, that there are materials, that there's racial bias, that ChatGPT, so that we can use it in a safe way. All the crap goes to other countries, and much more critical perspective as regards technology. More based on science and technology studies that say that we are no one to speak of technology because we're social scientists, but in fact, that's what we're doing, studying the impacts of this. Also, fighting the myth of neutrality in technology because it's harmful, and also looking at technology from a colonial standpoint because it's not, I mean, I have to say this, it's good that we focus on biases. Yes, they are problematic and perpetuate things, but if facial recognition or the AI or emotional recognition AI, which is already being used in the border to determine whether a person that is looking for asylum is saying the truth or not, and if that is not biased, is this technology more fair because it's not biased? Will we implement a technology in a vulnerability space like a border to recognize emotions, which has no scientific evidence, but since it's not biased, we can use it? I mean, I don't think so. It's good that we understand there are biases, this, but we should also question, is it convenient, this narrative of biases? Because in the end, it suggests biases from a technical standpoint that could be solved technologically, and neglecting, on the other hand, the social dimension of technology. And so skepticism and critical thinking. Thank you, Judith, for introducing this ingredient, which I saw people nodding. Very interesting, very new. For some of us, very grateful that you introduced it. Mohammed? Yes, I just wanted to say that it's not just racism, it's digital violence. And when especially people who have a more activist role, a more awareness-raising role in social media. In the past years, we've undergone extreme violence from an institutional standpoint. Mayors and some people who are very powerful, great influence, who have great influence, and they throw against these people their army of votes and artillery, and so an activist is alone and helpless with vis-a-vis this structure, all this huge structure, trying to go against this individual that's trying to turn things around. So either we understand seriously that this is violence and the social media is not a distant thing, and what happens in the virtual world is like the real world, or I think that what will happen is that these totalitarianisms will cut down our rights. I mean, these totalitarianisms are impacting people with threats and limiting our rights. So the challenge is how society is organized to create safe spaces for these people who are developing activism from civil society or even from the political sphere. And so it's not alien to us. I speak with many people from my town who are possible activists, entrepreneurs, leaders, and references for the community, and they do not become that because they're afraid that someone might come from the far right to use them as the ideal person to attack and to send the votes against. So we will have no references, and we won't be able to face all this unless we have strategies with which to protect, generate spaces that are safe for these people who dare face digital racism. So I think things are more serious than one might think, because I think that no one dares take the step, and those who have need legal advice. We need to be accompanied and supported on a daily basis so that we can measure the impact of what is happening. And on the other hand, I know some people don't agree, but I don't think we should set aside any space. I have not left Twitter, regardless of the violence. I think we have to be there. I mean, it's easy to leave and say, hey, look, this is run by an algorithm and I don't like how it's run, how it's being run. But I think we have to be everywhere, in every digital space as well. It's like, I'm going to leave this space that needs to be defended from the world of activism. And so safe spaces, be bold, and resist, because just like we would resist in the offline world, we have to do it in the digital world as well. Okay, thank you so much, Mohammed, for your knowledge and for... I've seen, we're already in Twitter, we're publishing, even if it's just to make noise and be heard. We're in the final part of this session. Questions, comments? Why don't I give you the microphone? I'll be out of the camera now. Can you introduce yourself, please? I'm Celia. I'm a teacher. I teach anthropology in the University of Barcelona. I'm see something difficult. Citizenship and the defense of rights. Many discourses of hatred with influencers that have hate speeches and who ask for rights and speak of vulneration of a violation of rights. But I think that maybe, I mean, how can we he was mentioning it a little bit. How can we defend the rights if people have rights and feel they have the right? Then you don't need to use violence against others, right? So I am missing here the recognition of the rights of people who are suffering violence and that they have their value and their speech recognized without needing to adapt to other contexts. I see racism in the community. In the digital world, I feel lost, and I see very much chaos, and everyone has the right to speak. But no, not everyone has the right to speak. I don't know if I made myself very clear. Thanks for your comments. Anyone want to say? Yes, let's have a quick round of comments and then we will finish. Let's do 2 more. Thank you. Thanks for this afternoon for speaking of this very necessary topic. One of the things you're talking about today on the impacts on activism and racialized people who take part politically and who experience rejection and violence digitally. It's horrible. I've experienced it myself. I was the Afro-descendant person to run for the mayor for the City Hall of Barcelona, and it had a huge impact in the country in terms of movements and against me personally. It's horrible. It's scary. There's impunity for those who attack, and there is an organization behind this whole violence. And one of the things I wanted to discuss about what Judith was mentioning is that digital racism is profitable. It is a business. And when Europe, as Judith said, has a framework that focuses on the user's experience and not the responsibility of the creation and the structures that allow for companies to benefit with this polarization that Mohamed was saying is a new vulnerability because it creates a paradigm in which the media foster this polarization because that's where the business of digital racism is. When we speak of digital racism, we're not speaking of racial discrimination, but rather it's an economic structure that is profitable. It's different from racial discrimination. It's not a matter of biases. It's a matter of businesses and something that supports the system that we live in. But as well, when we hear Ruha, we will learn a little more. I also want to mention about the resistance strategies generated individually, collectively, to face the biases in the algorithm or the racist inheritance of the codes that it works with. And we also have to speak of how there are resistance movements, for example, Black feminism, where these women are the one turning this around, this algorithm, taking the initiative and taking the lead so that, because globally we are one of the most abused, impunely abused group by this racism. Also, collectively, outside of the institutions, there are many group initiatives to turn the situation around. And I also want to mention, finally, as Nuria was saying, it's interesting to see the perspective from the schools, because last Friday we attended the presentation of the last report by SOS Racism with the data of 2024. And one of the reports that had increased the most was racism in school environments. And it wasn't a report or between the users, but basically what was claimed was the lack of action by the centers given situations of racism. So it's not just a structural and cross-sectional problem, but also there's a double violence when the professional teams working in schools, including families as well, refuse the existence of these facts, and so make it more difficult to do something about it or even prevent it yet. We don't have time, but who am I to cut you out with such valuable contributions? Please, very brief, okay? But let's go on. A couple of ideas, because I can think of so many things as I hear you. I have the feeling that besides the greenwashing, now we're seeing artificial intelligence washing, because no, it's neutral. I mean, it's artificial intelligence, as if it were something beyond a dimension, beyond all humans. Thinking of you as a teacher, as an educator, in schools there should be more than critical thinking, there should be ethics. Tolerance to everything? No, I'm sorry, some things are intolerable. And then I also think that violence generates pain, whether it be digital or physical violence or civic violence. I mean, it really leads to pain. It doesn't have to be categorized of where it comes from. And when people undergo constant pain, you end up blowing up. And this blowing up has an ethical origin, a poorly managed ethical problem. Those are just some of my ideas. Okay, last one. Okay, 2 bonuses. I think the lack of legislation is very, very relevant. I have a question. Do you think that there's anything unique in digital racism? In the digital environment, could it be seen only as a receiver of real racism, or does it have something unique about it that, I don't know how to put it. Like the anti-racism measurement steps we take can do nothing. Sorry, yes. Are there things that are specific of the digital environment, unique to the digital environment? I don't know if I made myself clear. Yes, and can we fight against it as we fight other forms of racism? And the last comment. Yes, thank you very much. Anonymity, the idea that to fight against racism in the digital world, you have to take anonymity out of the matter. I mean, I'd like to know what you think, because I think it's a problematic notion, and it's very important in the web. Wow, what questions? Shall we answer once you reply to whatever you want?
Està a les vostres mans.
So up to you.
Mira, jo agafo l'última.
Let me take the last question.
Sí, ètica, però ètica com a política.
Yes, ethics, but ethics as a policy, not as a code of ethics and universal principles.
És igual, ho poso aquí, ho poso aquí.
But here,
No, ètica
look.
com a política i...
So ethics as a policy, and I don't know, many of you might be teachers, but don't be angry, but my wish list is that from the schools are agile in terms of resistance and critical education and democratic, intense education. I think we have to go back, not from a punitive standpoint, but we have to give specific tools to the children so that they can respond, know how the algorithms works and everything, so that they know how to handle what happens, where they should go if they suffer racism, because they do suffer racism. And I suppose that in different areas, different racism. And so it might have different faces and must be confronted in different ways. And another thing, I think that the educational community, mothers, fathers, teachers, I think it's important that they create some sort of resistance and demand that tech companies respond in some way. You can't just have in social media anyone do as they please with xenophobic and chauvinistic and racistic speeches without a problem. I mean, let's do something to demand this responsibility. Wow. Let me see. About ethics, yes, indeed, very necessary. In school, if we don't work on strong democratic principles, it wouldn't be a school. Indeed. About the... Because one question was answered with the other remark. The algorithms she mentioned, we have to make children aware when they use any tool that they're feeding it. If my 13-year-old white boy sees a joke with a racist touch and retweets it or passes it on, he's saying to that AI that is valuable. And so it'll show up more times. So be aware that every action, no action is harmless. We have to educate a lot. Yes, we cannot do everything, but this critical thinking has to be there, and anti-racism must be there, and our children deserve it, and we have to work on that. And I love this notion. You said racism. I can't find it. I agree with what you said. Nothing is just because. Everything has a reason, and it's scary. And what type of technologies should be allowed and should not be allowed in the schools? I mean, when the faculty decide these things, we have to understand why we decide what we decide and the consequences of these decisions. And I think sometimes we're not prepared. We're being asked to decide on things that escape us. And I had more things to say, and I can't find it, but you still have 30 seconds.
Queden un parell de minutets, a veure si repesques.
Let me see if I can find my comments. Okay, anonymity against doing away with anonymity in the internet. I'm a person who was a queer, bisexual, and non-binary person, and thanks to my browsing through the web and doing it in an anonymous way. So anonymity hides very much violence and very much freedom. So I am against prohibiting anonymity in the web. Also, I think that we heard what makes digital violence unique is that it's very, very profitable. It's designed to be so. And so there could be a social media in Silicon Valley. Yes, we already have social media that are non-lucrative and managed by the community. What happens with most people when they go from Twitter to Mastodon? I'm bored. when they go from Twitter to Mastodon, they feel more bored. So it's a business because we've become addicted, and that's what they want it to be. And I think that this is what makes violence in the digital world more unique. It's very profitable, and on the other hand, no one is bearing the consequences. Now, on ethics, as Nuria said, we're not seeing an IA washing, but rather ethics washing everywhere. If you remove the little European regulation, it's because with codes of ethics and you can create ethical technology. I don't want ethical technology. I want a violence-free technology respecting fundamental rights. If you can encode that in an ethical way, okay. And then another thing, as I was saying, I think in black feminism is where most of the response could be found on what kind of technology we want, because the resistance strategies we see, the conceptualization of technologies from other perspectives comes mainly by black authors. Like the one we have here today. I'm very nervous, very excited. And so I think that as European white people, we must stop trying to save others and hear how they want to be supported. Thank you so much. Yes, some of us are nervous because of Ruha, but I have a book here. Maybe it could be signed after a moment. Yes, the difference between digital racism and conventional racism. I would say that digital racism has this gamification. I mean, TikTok and all these platforms, in the end, they want you to be racist without even being aware, representing, developing extreme ideas without even being aware of it, because it's all gamified and it's all very much fun, and so you get the feeling it's not really racism. So I think the specificity here is that there is a gamification. Wow, for not being experts, nice, this roundtable. Also the questions, I just want to say that I will have two more things I want to share. One, on Friday, we have here Rosalinda from Zero Abandonament platform. If you look at this publication, we will leave some copies there. It speaks of this anti-racist perspective in early school dropout. It's another area that we have to work on, and we will leave some copies here. And for teachers who want to dive in on artificial intelligence matters, this is on exam algorithms. This is 2 years old already, but for those of you who are not aware of artificial intelligence, for a first approach on this, you would find it useful, I think. Well, I think we have a little bit of a delay, but I believe it's been one of the most interesting roundtables I've attended. I appreciate and thank you for your knowledge and for the vulnerability of what we don't know. And let's move on to the next part, to the presentation of references and local projects with Bernat. Thank you.
Bé, doncs, moltes gràcies per
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Si podem passar...
Can we please...
Perfecte. A veure, hem fet una primera taula de debat sobre racisme i IA. Dos vectors, diguéssim, que eren el motiu que després tindríem la Ruha Benjamin.
The reason why we have here Ruha Benjamin. We are Fundació Bofill. In our foundation, our motto is education to change it all. And so we build a triangle
racisme,
racism,
i
artificial
educació.
intelligence,
I amb
and
aquest triangle
education. And in this
hem volgut
triangle,
convidar a
we
una
wanted to
sèrie
invite
d'entitats d'aquí de Catalunya
some
que ja
associations
estan
from
fent
Catalonia
coses
that
en
are
algun d'aquests
already
dos
doing
vectors.
some
Què
things
passa? Que
in
aquesta és la
these
idea
vectors.
inicial.
This is
Després
the
ens trobem que
starting
encara hi
point.
ha
And then we see
un
that
altre
there
biaix, que
is
és el
another
nivell micro
bias.
i el nivell macro.
The micro level
I
and
aquí
the
veurem que
macro
tenim
level.
una miqueta
And we'll
de
see
tot.
that we have a
nivell
little bit of
macro,
everything at a macro level.
I llavors aquestes 5 persones que
These 5
diguéssim,
people
conformen la fila zero,
make
potser les convidaria ja
in
que
the
vinguessin
front
aquí al meu
row.
costat,
I'd like to
perquè
invite
ens
them to
passarem
come
el
here
micro i
because
cadascú de
we
nosaltres farà
could pass
una
on the mic
intervencioneta
and each one of
de
us
2-3 minuts.
could speak for 2-3 minutes.
Com voleu fer-ho? Sobre...
Shall we?
Vinga, va, pugem, va. O us crido, diguéssim, sí?
Shall I call
a nivell,
on you? Okay,
aquest
so
debat micro i
this
macro.
macro
i
debate,
racisme.
artificial
Som a
intelligence
Catalunya.
and racism.
Un
We're in
debat
Catalonia.
que també volíem
A
introduir
debate
així,
that we wanted to
tangencialment,
introduce
és, al final
tangentially
l'IA
as well, is that
es fa
at
en
the end,
anglès, diguéssim.
artificial intelligence is in
El mes de
English.
desembre, novembre-desembre,
In
no tinc ben
November,
clar quan
December,
era, es va celebrar
there
el Dia
was
Mundial de la Llengua
the
Àrab
World
i fins i tot
Day
la
of Arab
UNESCO va
Language,
fer,
and the
diguéssim, un acte
UNESCO,
a la seva seu a París
and the headquarters in
preocupada
Paris
de dir que
had
la
an event
llengua àrab
concerned
hi ha
because
una
Arab
infrarrepresentació
language is
brutal en les
underrepresented
webs, i ja no
in the
parlem, diguéssim, de la
webs
intel·ligència
and, of
artificial,
course, in artificial
de dir,
intelligence
ostres,
as
si una
well.
llengua tan
I
potent
mean,
com
such a
l'àrab,
powerful
doncs ja hi ha
language
gent de la
is
UNESCO
already
que pateix de dir, què ens passa doncs, a les
underrepresented
llengües
in UNESCO. I
minoritzades.
mean, so
Per
what
parlar
about
molt breument
minority
d'això
languages?
tenim
So
amb
to
nosaltres la Maite
speak of
Melero,
this, we have Maite
que ve
Melero
del Barcelona
from
Supercomputing
the
Center,
Barcelona Supercomputing Center.
i una miqueta doncs, que ens introduirà aquest
And
debat.
she will introduce
Dèiem,
this debate.
És racisme o no és racisme?
Is it racism?
Bueno,
Is
si
it
ens ho
not?
prenem
If
en l'eix aquest de
we
desigualtats, és a dir, una cosa és
consider it
l'anglès com
from
a llengua
inequality,
hegemònica
if we
i
speak of
tota la
English
resta de
as the
llengües, què ens
ruling
passa?
language, what
Doncs,
about the
bueno,
other
des del
languages?
Barcelona
In the
Supercomputing
Barcelona
Center,
Supercomputing
això ho
Center,
explicant.
they are studying this precisely.
El concepte fila zero m'encantava.
I like this front row notion.
La veritat és que... Bueno, però aquí... pel vídeo. Bueno, però l'interessant aquí són els gràfics.
The interesting thing here are my graphs. I just wanted to explain what I wanted to show here. The first one is the physical world, the real world. We have here language distribution. The biggest part corresponds to languages with less than 1 million speakers. In total, we have about 7,000 languages in the world. The second part would be less than 1,000 speakers. Many of them also. And then we have smaller and smaller in the pie, and the end languages with over that are spoken much less. Next graph is the distribution of languages in the web. It's like deformation of reality. And here, these inequalities are amplified. English is over 50% of the space. And then all the others follow. The first 10 would cover 70% of the content. This has an impact on artificial intelligence because AI is fed by data, and the data basically come from the internet. What we have next to it, GPT-3, the first model before ChatGPT, and you see the linguistic makeup of it. As you see, language is overwhelming. So this is basically the situation.
La intel·ligència artificial, com us dic, diu de les dades que poden ser no estructurades, no etiquetades, que és el que trobem a internet, però
that are not labeled, found on the internet, and also quality data, labeled data as well, that can be used for quality applications. So it is a combination of both, and here's where we have even more differences.
Aquest gràfic d'aquí i aquesta taula són d'un article que ja té quasi 5 anys, però que segueix molt d'actualitat. i que fa com una
but very
classificació
updated still.
en grups de
It's
llengües.
a classification of language groups.
Perquè m'agrada molt el nom que els hi dona.
I like how it
Comença la
calls
classe
them.
número 5, és la dels
Class
guanyadors.
5 is
Aquests
the
tenen una
winners,
presència dominant en
with
línia,
a dominant
tenen
presence
inversió,
online, where they have investments,
les administracions
the
públiques hi
public
inverteixen,
administrations
i els
invest on it,
desenvolupadors i les
and
corporacions també.
developers and
La
corporations
classe
as well.
número 4
Class
són
4
els desfavorits.
are the
Tenen
less
moltes dades,
favored.
seria l'àrab, per exemple.
For example, Arab.
Aquí tenim exemples, de fet. En aquesta taula veu exemples de les classes
Here we
que
have
estic dient.
examples.
Els desfavorits tenen moltes dades a
The
internet,
less favored have many
però
data
no
on the
tenen tantes
internet,
d'aquestes etiquetades.
but not so many are
Després tenen la
labeled.
classe número 3
And we
és la
have
que
class 3,
anomena les estrelles
which
emergents.
are the
També tenen
emerging
presència a la
stars
xarxa
with presence in the
I
web,
aquesta
and
presència els
this
està donant un
presence
impuls.
is
Després ve la classe 2,
helping
són els
them. And then
esperançats.
class 2,
Tenen
the
molt
hopeful,
poquites dades etiquetades,
with very few
fet que
data
indica que
labeled,
almenys hi ha
indicating
alguna mica
that
de comunitat
at
d'investigadors que
least
els hi dona suport.
there's some
classe número u
research community that supports
els
them. And then
anomena els
class
que
1
sobreviuen.
are the survivors.
Aquests tenen una
These
miqueta
have
de dades no
just
etiquetades,
very
una
few
miqueta de
non-labeled
continguts d'internet. I després hi ha
data,
una
just a few
immensa
contents
quantitat
in the web,
oblidats
and then
que
a
no
huge
tenen
amount of the
ni
forgotten
presència a internet.
without presence
Val?
in the web.
I això està representat
And that
en
is
aquest,
represented in this chart.
en aquest graf. Com veieu, la classe 0
As
és
you
la més
see,
gran
class 0 is the biggest,
i la manca de
and the
tecnologia per a
lack
aquestes
of
llengües
technology
de
for
classe 0,
these
pues,
class
imagineu-vos
0
totes les
languages,
llengües
you can imagine.
que es parlen a
All the
Austràlia,
languages spoken
a Amèrica
in
Llatina,
Australia, Latin
a
America,
Àfrica, a moltíssims llocs del món,
many places in the world,
també llengües a Europa, inclús a,
also in
inclús a
Europe
Espanya.
or in
estic pensant,
Spain.
no sé.
I might think of
L'aragonès té una mica de presència, potser
the
no seria
language
ni el
spoken
zero,
in the
Doncs,
region of
la
Aragon.
manca de
Anyway,
tecnologia per a
the
aquestes
lack
llengües
of
de classe
technology for
0,
these technologies,
moltes,
which
però que
are
només són un
many,
15% de
but only
parlants del món,
represent 15% of
el que
the
farà és
speakers in the
empènyer
world,
aquestes
will
persones
take
a
these
passar-se
people
a les llengües de la
to
classe
move
5,
on
que són
to
les hegemòniques,
class
que són les
5
dominants, i són les que en
languages, which
definitiva
are the dominant
acabaran,
ones, and which will
emportant-se
end
el
up
pastís.
taking the whole pie.
I això és més o menys el
And this is more or less the message.
Doncs moltes gràcies, Maite.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Maite. Very interesting, yes, indeed, to have the Barcelona Supercomputing Center in this discussion on AI and biases. You have the contact here in case you want to write to her. Second example of the local ecosystem, things that are being done as to AI and racism. We have Imad Kulebi, visitor at the BSc, and, well, from the BSc, there's this spin-off, which is Galtea, it's their own spin-off, and in Galtea they analyze in social biases in AI. And, well, we'll hear from him. You have the floor. Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here because I come from social grassroots movements, then from a movement in social entrepreneurship, then the BSc, and now I'm here. And I think that what we are doing in Galtea fits in very well indeed. So it's great to be able to talk to such an audience as you. Precisely, I worked with Maite. I was in the Language Technologies Unit team. And what we did was to create these large models for minorized languages such as Catalan and also Spanish, that sometimes is not so much, or didn't used to be so much, amongst the main languages in networks. And part of our work was to assess the different models. Okay, so we worked on making sure whether the models work well without biases and if they have good quality data, because from what Nuria has said, I mean, precisely she explained, right, that yes, I mean, when you have large corpora, there might be biased data if there is no reflection or no critical analysis, okay? Because you do have structural bias, because that's what happens with data in the internet that have not been filtered. So it's important to assess these models, and also what we call to do an alignment, okay? For these corporate to work, you have to carry out alignments for them to be more, well, based more on equality. And at Galtea, what we do is take this knowledge to other more commercial organizations, for example, companies that generate models and products based on large data models, so that they have a way to assess whether these products are working without biases, okay? So that they really have good quality data and that are solid and robust as well against possible adversary attacks. So in Galtea, in this kind of ecosystem, I'd say we contribute another added layer, which is the layer of knowledge, activism, and critical thought. And I think there's something else as well, which is, that all this is part of the development ecosystem. Everything is moving very fast, but we should never forget this layer of critical analysis. And one has to be able to detect any problem that might happen in all these AI products that are entering our lives. I mean, we should be able to detect anything that's bad happening, and we should be able to correct possible errors or deviations and violations of rights even. So one has to be vigilant. This is what we do at Galtea. And finally, let me give you an example of what we're working on right now, and it might be easier for you to understand maybe, is that we are analyzing chatbots of different companies. And with these chatbots, what happens is that sometimes there's a certain exclusion. It might not seem to happen, but if somebody non-native is talking to this, to a chatbot, well then, there can be adversarial tactics that would be based on a bias of exclusion, depending on the community. So we can detect these lacks of consistencies. A short time back, we launched the platform. Here you have more information and access here in this QR. So you can obtain information, and please do visit us. Really, we're happy about what we do. We hope to be able to contribute plenty. Thank you.
Doncs, moltes gràcies, Vibers.
Thank you very much, Vibers. Thank you. So we do see a practical case, yes, a spin-off coming from the BSc, and it's doing such interesting work. Also, as regards research on AI biases, we have Carlos Castillo. He's an ICREA researcher at the Pompeu Fabra University. He specializes also in AI biases, but most especially in processes of searching for a job. You're going to be speaking English, right? Okay. So listen, I have to say, at the back of the room, well, you have the booth with the human interpreters, and I mean, we do have the little devices for you to listen to the translation if you need it. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Hey, Ruha. So I'm Chato Carlos Castillo. I'm a computer scientist. I was born in Chile, and here I lead a group on social computing. There are actually a couple of people from my team here. One is Marina, who's sitting there. She studied AI errors and human error in the context of decision support system. And we also have another visitor, Madalena, from University of Pisa, and she studies sexism in platforms like Stack Overflow, community question answering platforms. So I lead an international Horizon Europe research project on algorithmic hiring, or the usage of algorithms in recruitment. And there is funded by a €3 million grant by the European Union. And we expected to see many things here, like opacity, bias, like people feeling disenfranchised. But there was something really interesting that we have been finding out lately, especially when we interview people. We have interviewed people in 7 cities in Europe. This was from an interviewer in Germany, and we heard something similar from our colleagues in Norway, that people change their identities to apply to jobs online. And they even, some people change legally their names to apply to jobs online. And they also feel very conflicted about this. And like this person who said, I want to keep my identity. I want to honor my parents. I want to honor my roots. I have to change just to get a job. And this goes against my values. But at the same time, I'm desperate. And we hear a lot this desperation in people who are applying to jobs online. Nowadays, you cannot apply to a job if it's not online. And therefore, people just hit this wall and feel that, that they have to adapt to the technology and not the other way around, which is like really the worst case scenario for this. Okay, that's what I wanted to say. Thanks.
So, thank you very much. Estem veient, diguéssim, que el triangle aquest que dibuixàvem d'IA, racisme i escola, l'estem tocant, doncs, sobretot IA, racisme. Ara entrem ben bé en el tema escola. Tenim amb nosaltres també la Sílvia Zurita, que és una antiga coneguda d'aquí a la casa, havia participat en el programa Magnet. Ella és mestra i ara mateix està en el CSIRE amb temes de cultura maker. I una miqueta el que vam parlar és de dir, ella reflexiona, té molt de coneixement sobre el tema maker als Estats Units, té molt coneixement al tema maker aquí a Catalunya, i una miqueta volia plantejar, doncs, a veure si hi ha semblances i...
Thank you. I'm a teacher, and now I'm running an innovation project in the education department in school, putting a spice maker with 150 other schools in the country. And we do this for children to learn on digital manufacturing and more and better. And the hope is that they learn that we are able to do things that they thought they wouldn't be able to do, and that we can change things to their surprise. That's the goal, right? Although we use not artificial intelligence, but we use artificial digital manufacturing machines. I'm saying this because we would love to be able to change and to have our children be certain that we have to be able to change, and they can change. Also because many studies of the maker world in America explain that it's a very racial world, totally permeated from the racial differences in American society, and it's a world that's basically a male, white, middle class, or high middle class people. And when he contacted me, I said, okay, I'm a teacher, and I'm a technological person. I want to fix things, okay? And being pragmatical, I think I'm missing something, a way of how to approach racism from here, because with all my respect to the racial struggle in the United States, which is huge and very, very tough, I think more than what we have here, I have the feeling that many of the explanations that we hear from the American maker culture, we cannot apply here, because things that they explain from there don't resonate here in my culture. So I'd like to see, for example, with the gender matters, I do feel more capable on working on that. On racism, I'd like to have a more local study and more local perspective, more from our culture. The trauma, the wounds of American society, the things they have to overcome are very different from the ones we have to overcome. And I don't want to solve a problem they have in the United States, because that has to be done in the United States. And here, I mean, it's not that I should try to solve that. It could make things worse, and that's what I wanted to summarize. Thank you.
Perfecte, moltes gràcies per introduir aquest debat.
Thank you for presenting this debate. And finally,
continuant amb l'eix cultura, educació i racisme,
continuing with culture, education, we have Adriana Torroella, who's a social educator specialized on anti-racism. She works with the Catalan government in a program to detect, she can tell us about it, whether there are racist issues in the schools. Thank you. So yes, I'm Adriana. We have two projects, Fahana, which is a project that started in 2020, focusing on how to work or prevent racism in the educational world. For those of you from the educational world in 2021, the plan for violence-free schools was created together with the unit to support students in cases of violence. And what I will present are the conclusions of our project and the collaboration with this unit. I'm a little nervous because I have many ideas here. Like, for example, the local situation of discriminations. In terms of the racialized or migrated students, many things that happen in the schools, and in the end, the teachers are worried about whether there are bad words being used, insults, about the origin of these people. Now, whether we're speaking of the rural or metropolitan world, wherever the centers are, in the end, we tend to forget that they are in a process of building their identity, recognizing the peers, and so it's not always this ideological part of racism, xenophobic as discourse, because they could be insulted with any other name. What they need is to build and recognize myself and not others, and get together all these things in society. That happens between the migrated, racialized students. The teachers might say, but they say it themselves. But on the other hand, in these interventions that we have in our independent project and the department, we do see that part of the students, in some cases, do feel closer to far-right ideas and symbols, and these students, actually, they're not so far from the vital movement they are. If they are building their identity, many times they say, I have my right to express myself, or maybe it's a fad, or it's a thing that's typical of their age, but there's more alignment towards this racist, fascist ideology behind. And in these 5 years, I've seen that there's another idea. I mean, I've spoken of what happens between racialized and the local white students, and then, on the other hand, the teachers representing the authority in educational centers. In Catalonia, we are not reflecting the diversity of the students, not just their origins, but also other things as well. So what would the wish list be? I end up hearing it's pointless to have a support unit for students in a situation of violence if, firstly, this violence must be recognized. If we, as teachers, find it hard to recognize this violence, all the resources that are available are more difficult to activate. So as professionals, the challenge is to be able to speak of racism, as we're doing here, speaking honestly with our own experiences and contexts. We've always had migrants in Catalonia. It's not just now. And recognize that this is a problem with its own structural and local specificities so that we can make headway, but especially separating it from pointing at the kids saying that it's a problem of these generations because it's our responsibility. And they're just reflecting what we are passing on as adults. So this is the conclusion, basically. Having had interventions in different contexts, you see it doesn't have so much to do whether you do it in a population that has more racial diversity or not. It doesn't matter. In the end, you end up finding the same. So it's evidence that racism is a problem in Catalonia, not just in some populations or some neighborhoods. Thank you.
Bé, doncs, moltes gràcies a la fila zero. Ja podeu
Thank you so much to the front row. And now,
tot el know-how acumulat
with all the know-how we had in the round table, and
panorama local,
considering the local situation that we've discussed just now, let me give the floor to Liliana Arroyo, who will introduce the presentation. We're all here to listen
Gràcies,
to.
crec que tenim un repte de temps, però intentarem allò exprimir minuts, val? Aprofitant doncs, que tenim la visita de la Ruha Benjamin, que m'acompanya aquí a l'escenari. Per tant, Ruha, please take a seat and welcome to Hub Social. Aleshores, havíem preparat com una introducció. Només us diré dues coses abans de donar pas, i és que en lloc de presentar, en lloc que ella faci la seva presentació, que la fa molt bé, perquè he tingut ocasió de veure-la presentar en altres circumstàncies, el que hem decidit...
What we decided, since we have this event the other way around, the keynote speaker, with everything we heard, we will have a conversation with her with the questions that we've had in the first part. We've taken many notes in the first part, so let's see how many of these questions we can answer, or she can answer. And another thing I wanted to say is I highly recommend this book, because in a context in which we spoke of all the structural forces and the economic model that generates a market and design patterns for technology, and that takes us to maximize the worst side of humans with confrontation, polarization. A book like this one, this manifesto for imagination, is a breath of fresh air, very well written, and it covers as you read the book, you get the feeling that you're getting...
Is it working or... Yeah, okay. So, may I... However you want. Yeah, I can ask you if you want. Yeah, okay. So what I was saying, basically, I was introducing the book as an oxygen ball, okay, amidst all this context that we have been describing and discussing this afternoon. So yeah, I'm not going to steal any more minutes because they are here to listening to you. So I think that one of the aspects that has been coming and coming, it's to talk about strategies. So I don't know if you would like to start to share some strategies that you could imagine. And if you want to mention the Penguin program, given that there's an interest in the House about the importance of education, your experience as a child enrolled in the Penguin program maybe can be inspiring for people today.
So thank you for hanging in there. You know, the way that this was organized is really special, and I wish every event that I went to had a similar format where I got to be the student first and listen and take in and hear the local concerns, the local initiatives. I benefit much more. So I thank you for organizing it, and for those who shared, it really was a pleasure. And I feel like it was just like a taste, a little commercial, but we need a longer day to be able to get into it.
We take note of that.
Okay. And so perhaps instead of talking about my childhood experience of education, which I describe in the book, I'll say that I spent earlier today at one of the local schools, at a school talking to 9th through 12th graders. And we were having a conversation very similar about digital racism. And I can tell you both that they crave it, the information and the insights, but also their questions showed me that they are ready for action. All of the questions had to do with, now I that understand, what do I do about it? How do I get involved? And so it's not too early to have these conversations, not about students, but with students. They are ready. And I think in terms of strategy, there's two things that I really emphasize to them that I think we would also benefit from remembering. that we want to develop our critical faculties, our critical attention to the things that are harmful, digital racism, but we also want to empower students and ourselves to be creative. The critical and the creative have to go hand in hand. So we say, this is what we don't want, this is what we do want. And we have to empower. That's why the maker space and all of that is important, to think about building that capacity to do something about it. So I want us just to sit with that for a moment. I'll give you a quick example of a creative initiative that sort of will get our juices flowing when it comes to the way that these technologies are used in policing. We have a lot of research and examples about, surveillance, about predictive tools with policing. So there was an artist by the name of Sam Levine, and he created an app that you can actually download, and it's called the White Collar Early Warning System. And it's an app that shines a light on white-collar crimes, namely crimes of capitalism. So when you go to a new city, you open the app, and it shows heat marks predicting where white-collar crimes are happening, usually the financial district, So he's showing an example of how to creatively shine a light on a problem that would rather remain hidden. Because too often these policing technologies are training on Black communities, poor communities, migrant communities, and the white-collar criminals, they get to stay out of the digital view, right? So this is like a creative way to show a critical dimension of these policing technologies. And I think it's worth noting that it's an artist using digital tools to bring this to light, all right? And so with that, I wanted to just flag maybe a couple things from the earlier discussion, a few threads that I found really resonant and interesting, and then maybe end my opening just reflections with a few provocations for our conversation. So one is just for us to recognize that this kind of reflection and conversation is part of a much longer freedom struggle. Although we have the word digital here, makes it seem like it's new. It's not new. And freedom fighters going back generations that we associate with working for justice, they have always had one eye on the role of data and technology on perpetuating harms. Whether we think of someone like W.E.B. Du Bois or Ida B. Wells or even Martin Luther King, who said, "We have guided missiles and misguided men." He was talking to a whole audience at Stanford University decades ago, Stanford in the belly of the Silicon Beast, right? Where he said, we have computers that are really making property rights trump people's rights and people's concerns. And he really was focusing on the role of technology in injustice. So what is new about digital racism? One of the ways to think about what's new is that technologies in general, they freeze social relations. They fix them. And so whether we talk about digital racism or scientific racism, which is also should be part of the conversation, the reason why in 2025 we're still talking about racism is because the way that science and technology have made these seem like they're objective and neutral judgments about the world. The durability of racism is precisely because of the role of science and technology in perpetuating them. And so, we want to think about Muhammad mentioning all of that work they're doing with families and trying to build community, those social relationships is so important that we shouldn't focus only on the technology, but the society that surrounds it, the ecosystem. It reminded me when Muhammad was talking about this quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson. He said, "In science, when human behavior enters the equation, things go non-linear. That's why physics is easy and sociology is hard," right? The hard part is dealing with humans. The technology, we can figure that out. but it's really these human relations that make things so intense. And so that's where we should invest more energies and more attention. In terms of strategies, Nuria VP, I'll say Nuria VP and Nuria S. Nuria VP, really invited us to question all of the focus on the digital. And it reminded me how a few years ago during the pandemic, and again, focusing on education, because students were sent home, they couldn't take all of the exams and the tests that were important. The UK government used an algorithm to predict students' grades for the A-level exams that they need to get into university. And the schools that were more working class schools, more diverse schools, their grades the students got were lower than their wealthy, whiter counterparts. So the students went to the streets. They protested. And if you look at their signs show a lot of insight. They're really intelligent about questioning these algorithms. And there was one sign in particular this girl is holding, and it says, "Our scores should not equal our postal codes." It's important because it's a reminder that the algorithm, the technology, is not creating the problem from scratch, right? It's reflecting and then reproducing existing inequity in the geography of the society. So any conversation about technology can't start with the technology. As Nuria VP said, we have to start with the society, the inputs, not the unpacks, right? And so this is another part of the strategy in terms of how we frame the narrative. We have to be very careful not to fall into the trap of getting so fixated on the technology itself when we forget that the technology is reflecting the larger society, right? And then Nuria S. was talking about how really thinking about going beyond banning these technologies in schools to how we engage them, regulate them. And there's an open source book, volume that you can all download that I think is really very helpful called Critical Digital Pedagogy. 3 words, and it's lots of different contributors and authors. But there's one part in there that I think is really useful practically. It's called a crap detector, like bullshit detector, crap detector, how you detect crap in technology. And it's a rubric, a series of questions that anyone can ask, a whole classroom, one individual, to really pull back the screen and look at what's happening in the black box of any of these technologies. And it's written for teachers and educators and students to engage these tools rather than be scared of them or to love them. Move beyond that, beyond fear, beyond love, how to critically engage them. So I would suggest that this volume is a really great place to start. And then lastly, really thinking about the AI Act and the ways, again, that Judith was bringing up. We have to move beyond safety and responsible AI to really address the violence, the harms, because many of these laws have huge loopholes in them. They create digital rights for some, and they give permission for police and immigration enforcement to go after certain people in the law. It's built in, right? And so as we do that, I think we can, again, as Judith said, kind of get fixated on the bias part and forget that even if we get rid of the bias, even if it's equal opportunity oppression, everyone's oppressed the same, then the problem hasn't gone away. We have to really grapple with the underlying values that are animating these beyond, even if they're not impacting one group worse than the other. I'll save my other points, maybe they'll come back to them, but that was initial reflections weaving in the conversation from earlier today. Yeah.
Thank you, Ruha. I was also thinking about another example, which is led by Tiera Tangsley, which is Yeah, may I switch to Catalan if you
Yes,
already know?
please.
És un programa, és una
It's,
professora, ella està en la llista d'una de les 100
Professor,
dones
one of the
en l'àmbit
100
de la intel·ligència artificial
women
ètica, que
in
per
our
cert, en la
ethical
part
artificial
de
intelligence,
l'ètica de la
and
intel·ligència
besides
artificial, hi ha
ethics and
moltíssimes
artificial
dones treballant i
intelligence, there are
moltíssimes
many
d'elles
women
afrodescendents,
working
o sigui,
and many
això ho hem de dir
Afro-descendants.
i els hi devem
So we have to say
moltíssim,
this. We owe
perquè si
very
només
much
anéssim
to
amb la
them,
legislació
because
europea
if
estaríem
we
encara molt
were only
molt
stuck with
enrere, no? I amb la
European
recerca que
legislation,
fem,
would be
que fem
very,
des
very
d'aquí.
far back.
Llavors,
So,
en aquest programa, ella el que
in this
feia era una
program,
escola d'estiu,
she had
pensava
a
que eren 3
summer
setmanes,
school
vale? És
for
el
3
AI
weeks.
Race and Abolition Program.
AI
I
Race and
agafava un
Abolition
robotet que es
Program.
diu
She
Moxie,
took a little
vale? Que
robot
està
called
preparat
Moxie, which is prepared for students 5 to 10 years, I don't know, for robotics after school class. And it worked with Afro-descendant children in the United States. And these children would ask questions to Moxie, and Moxie would answer things that didn't sound familiar to these students. And throughout the 3 weeks, these spaces of representation, they would retrain Moxie, change the name, and add many more references to their culture, music, and these things. And I think it's a very relevant experience of how, while we reform and we make sure that violence is no longer structurally encoded in the legal frameworks, in the meantime, how can we use this technology for this critical spirit? And
when you were explaining the app of white-collar crimes and showing up the financial district as a place. So I think that in your book and in your work, because you were trained as a sociologist, but now you define yourself as a transdisciplinary scholar, which I think it's not a minor thing. You use a lot of references based on science fiction. So how can you think that, or how do you think that science fiction and imagination exercises and these spaces for thinking differently really outside of the box and not just to repair what it's not working, but completely, turning around the gameplay. How do you think that can help us in this moment and to have these difficult conversations with those students that are already there, that they are ready, they are mature enough to have these conversations about structural violence, not only digital racism?
Yeah, I think the focus on science fiction is part of that effort to build our creative capacity, to not just be critical, but to be creative, and to ask that what-if question. What if we did things differently? When I was in graduate school, I was studying biotechnologies and the social dimensions of biotechnologies, and I would interview scientists in the field, in their labs, in various meetings, and these scientists who were working on, cutting-edge treatments using regenerative medicine, like, for example, if I take a little skin cell from you, Nuria, and then I reverse engineer it to create a kidney that matches you. So you don't have to get a donor. You can use your own your own kidney made for you. This kind of seemingly far-fetched medicine, they were doing it. They were getting funding to do it, and I would talk to them, and they would say, when I was a kid, I watched this movie. When I was a teenager, I read this book. So their ideas about science, they got it often from these fictional examples, especially Star Trek would come up again and again. So I said, this boundary between fact and fiction, or science and science fiction, it's much more porous than we think. We create our universities and we put the sciences here and the humanities here, but really in reality, it's much more mixed. But the problem is, only some people get to materialize their imagination. The way that we've set up education, not everyone has that opportunity to take what's here and bring it out into the world, right? Another way to understand the many different harms that we're experiencing with respect to technology is that we're living inside someone else's imagination. A small sliver of humanity right now is encoding their visions into our digital structures, and then the rest of us just have to live with it and navigate it. And so in my view, the purpose of education is to radically expand who and what gets a say in shaping our future. But we have to practice building that muscle, that imagination muscle, that creative muscle. You know, it doesn't come naturally. When we can't leave it just to people who think that they're artists, everyone has to be involved, you know? So one of the things that this book tries to do, the last chapter is called an imagination incubator. Questions, activities, prompts, you can do in a class, you can do in a setting like this, to build our muscle of imagination, whether it's in terms of like public budgeting and finance, whether it's something like Decidim, whether it's something in healthcare or another context. And then one of the things that we did after this book was published, I teamed up with another play scholar. She focuses on play. We created an imagination playbook. So it's just a website you can go to, imaginationplaybook.com. And instead of just like questions and prompts, it's games and activities that you can actually do. It's more embodied. Again, to build that muscle that we need to be able to challenge the dominant imagination and to create alternative ones that will actually support human flourishing.
Actually, in this website, there's this nice sentence by her about the importance of incorporating all this imagination plays. So yeah, I really recommend the source. I've been using it in class. Nice. I have to confess, and it's fantastic because so the thing is how to make things actionable.
Yes.
It's not only about thinking, as I was saying. Imagination is the capacity that every human being has, but social imagination, it's what limits the imagination, self-confidence, I would say.
Yes.
So, estem a punt d'acabar la sessió. De fet, ens quedaria un minutet, però com que hem començat 10 minutets tard, jo crec que aquí hagi de marxar, doncs cap problema, evidentment. Però si us sembla bé, allargarem aquests 5-10 minuts i ara, en lloc de seguir jo fent preguntes, estic segura que en teniu. I per tant, doncs, obrim micro a la sala i podem recollir intervencions, reaccions, comentaris, el que necessiteu.
Questions, reactions, anything you want to say.
No tinc vergonya,
Don't be shy.
Vinga.
Hola, bona tarda.
Hi, good afternoon. I wanted to say something about one of the remarks we had before on the lack of references, Afro-descendant or Black women in this context. I mean, here we are. Hello. She comes from the world of politics, academics. I write books. I'm in the press. We're in the editorial world. So maybe I wonder if in this framework of racism we're discussing today, beyond digital racism, do we not have the space and the recognition? Maybe that would be because there's a structure which, on the one hand, makes us invisible, and on the other hand, from extractivism, it takes advantage of our knowledge and makes it its own. So we have to go a step beyond, and we should ask if we are here, and we have been for decades. If we're not here, why are we not here? And what can we do for us to be here? But we are doing our part of our task. We are doing what we have to. I guess what we still need to see is how others do theirs. Thank you. Briefly, to give some context, the debate we had, I mean, one thing is the Black community, Afro-American community. No? Okay. Our context was saying, in the end, the debate that we are getting is very related to the American Afro-descendant community, and why don't we have a look at what happens with the African community we have here in Catalonia. This was a little bit the reflections. These were the ideas a little because, for example, globally, if we speak of enslavement roots, which is very present as a debate in the United States, when we translate that here, we have migration debates. We don't have enslavement debate. So. Sorry, no, if they don't use a microphone, we cannot hear. Apologies. Sorry, for the streaming. If there's a debate, everyone wants to hear. Who had the floor? Yes, you can ask or you can continue the conversation. This has generated many reactions. I'll walk around. That's my contribution. But I believe you were the first one to raise your hand. I have two things to say. One, for him, and I have a question to ask, because I was in the previous panel and I had to present our experience, but I'm also here because I agree with what is being said, and I think that here many things are happening and many things are being done, and many of the things I presented would not have been done without the references. So how to give value to this all? And then, since we have you here, I wanted to ask, although maybe if this debate, whenever you can get a chance to answer my question, to me, as a young person, when we hear about digital racism, one tends to focus very much on youth, and I wonder, does it really have that age thing to it, or is it more cross-sectional, but being focused on a specific group? Do you have any other experiences? Why don't we save the questions for after and hear more debate and questions? I think that part of the problem with this invisibility is you think it's something that is not known in Catalonia. Catalonia is very related to Equatorial Guinea. And in fact, Barcelona was the metropolis for Equatorial Guinea. We are descendants. We were born here over 40 years ago because our parents, some of our parents also were born here. Some of our parents came here when they were small, when Guinea was still belonged to Spain. And the Catalan community was the biggest settlers in that place. So if you don't know the relationship between Catalonia with Equatorial Guinea, you can watch 30 minutes in the Catalan television with a very short program that explains it super clearly. Our community, Afro-descendant, African, has been here for many decades. It's not the year 2000 nor yesterday or the day before. As Adriana was saying, the work she does is possible because in the 90s, I'm saying this because we are in an educational settings. So in the 90s, one of the associations in the city was the ETANE Association, which specifically was devoted to educational interventions in the Catalan educational system. The conversations of ETANE with the Catalan Education Department made it possible to have one subject matter included in the school program relating the relationship between Catalonia and Equatorial Guinea. Not knowing this, the fact that some people don't know this doesn't mean it's something new. The fact that some people do not make the effort to know about their own history, the history of their own country, because they're not interested for whatever reason, doesn't make us suddenly disappear. Our community has been around here for decades, working in politics for decades. It's not a migratory thing. Our parents didn't migrate. They just changed provinces. They just moved to another province. When Equatorial Guinea became independent in 1968, our parents were here. Our parents fought against fascism, and when all this happened and was over, they could remain here without citizenship. They were not given any more scholarships, and they stayed here until they had their regular papers, until it was possible. And it's not that the information isn't there. It's just that people are just not interested in learning about it. I had to expend my economy, my health, everything, because I've fought for this to be a debate in the country. I did my best for this to be possible. And because of this, because of what Mohammed was saying, this collective consciousness makes us understand that when one of us speaks, to speak the truth as it is, no matter how uncomfortable it is, no matter how painful it is, the reaction we get is like collective discipline, like what we've just seen. What you're talking about is, oh, that's from the United States. No, the situation is not the same here. Sorry, what? That's what you said. Yes, you did. You said you can't use it. It's not the reality here. The ethnic-racial situation in Catalonia is very diverse. Non-white people are 43% of the Catalan population today, nowadays. It's not a matter of migration. It's not a matter of administration. It's a question of ethnic and racial situation. So not wanting to see the similarities between the situation in the United States and here is why we don't want to see that Black people are not the majority as in the United States. But what about gypsies? Wouldn't gypsies be like the Black population? Wouldn't it apply? I mean, it's a matter of desired ignorance. Not wanting to know. In 2025 is a political choice. And so maybe it's high time to learn and take other decisions and think twice before you say what you don't understand. And again, exerting the violence of invisibility that we have been suffering for decades here. Thank you so much for your comments. Okay, a couple more turns, and I do want to ask so that we can all contribute more and we don't get the feeling that we ran out of time. Let's all be brief. I mean, you're all very valuable, but we want to hear other voices as well, okay? So please, please, brief. First here, and then I'll go back there. I want to thank you and say that one of the worst things that's happening in Catalonia is Islamophobia with the Muslim community, less organized for the time being, with quite an important poverty bias. The situation in Sal, our friend can tell us about the evictions, invisibility of many women, the situations in schools. My son, today, in a school in the center of the city, half of the class could not go on summer camps because they will happen at the end of Ramadan nowadays in a high school in the city center in Barcelona. I agree. There are groups or communities that are better organized, that have been reflecting longer on discriminatory processes, but this is becoming something quite institutionalized, and I think institutions are not really doing what they have to. And so I think I understand your anger. I do, and I agree. But I think we have to be demanding with regards to our institutions. I know it's tough, but we need the mic. Thank you. Firstly, apologies, because I don't know your work. True. You might think it's a personal choice. It's not. I'm very curious about many things, but there are many things I am unaware of, and I am unaware of your work, and I'm so sorry. I missed what I was saying. I'm not saying that. The thing is that when I read references from the United States, I'm not saying that what happens in the United States is not very hard and that cannot be applied here. Of course, there are things that can be applied here. Part of racism is universal, no doubt. But the thing is that when I try to apply it in my classroom, and yes, when we finish, please, if you give me the references of your work, which I am unaware of, I'm so very sorry. You can scold me. Sorry, no microphone. Sorry, we cannot hear without a microphone. Okay, if it's in the Catalan Department of Education, I will look at it. I didn't know. I was unaware, not because I didn't want to know. I know it's not your job, yes. But if I hadn't asked, I wouldn't know, you know? I just wanted to explain. I'm not saying nothing is applicable, but when I get the information, I do get it. I don't know why. American culture is better when getting to be known more than the Catalan Education Department. And had I not been in FEDES, I know that many things resonate and some things are alien. This is what I was saying. That's all I was saying, and I'm really, really sorry. If you say 30 seconds, please, please, please. When social media gives you the echo, I met her with and started my anti-racism process because Instagram recommended her things. So when we are in a situation in which we are acting in a violent way without realizing we're doing it, I think we can't say, well, come and explain why I'm being violent. I mean, we should be the ones looking at ourselves and say, if all this is happening and I'm doing this, what can I do? And I work with FEDEZ, thank you so much, but restorative justice also occurs redistributing resources to these communities that are doing an excellent job. And I think that speaking of, I mean, it was ignorance. No, we've all suffered male chauvinistic violence. And we know that racism exists, and as white people, I suppose we are doing it. Saying that you are anti-racist without it entailing anything for yourself? I mean, I started this saying today that I felt I was an imposter because I didn't want to speak of racism as a white person. I mean, I was very anxious today because this is not my place. I can study technology from this standpoint because I do it from an economic standpoint, and I don't understand the economic situation without understanding the consequences of racial capitalism. But I should not be speaking of this here. There are people in Barcelona, racialized people, who could speak of this, for example. And basically, that's it. I mean, on the one hand, when we're interested in something, the social media can also help us find references in our communities who are working on this. And I think this is I've been following for 10 years. And I attend the master classes, and we have to understand what our role is as white people. And I think this is what I missed on the debate today. We had a very academic and education perspective, but as a white person, what am I perpetuating, right? That's what I missed.
Once again, Judith, thank you. The last one, I'm sorry, it has to be the last, and then we go to Ruha. Yeah, I'll try and be, well, as brief as possible, going back to what has been said. I wanted to add something, and that is, at the end of the day, I mean, I got to Catalonia when I was 2. I'm 26 now. I have never been a civil servant. I collaborate with the public administration, but I'm not a civil servant. And I'm surprised if I myself, growing up in this system without being a direct part, if I am already aware of all the things that are being done, I do understand that maybe, well, with other people, yes, there might be a bias, and maybe people are not as curious as they should be. I suppose I was curious, well, because of where I was, but I mean, I'm sorry, it's all around, when this thing of anonymity, technology, social networks, I mean, it's what Judith was saying and others, you can really get the information if you want it. And then if we talk about all these institutions, and some people see them as more utopian or whatever, listen, there's a huge part of all this task of what I do that I started because of a guideline published by the Bofill Foundation, precisely. That's why I was so happy when they told me to come here. It was like closing the circle. Well, not closing, I want to come again. But listen, in 2009 already, so long ago, for me it's ages ago, and it talks about this. And so, I mean, it's there if you want to find it. And I got from those guidelines, I got a lot that I could use personally and started applying it professionally. I think that Catalonia, I mean, there's a lot of work done, but there are so many resources that are open to everyone. So really, it's all there. And I mean, okay, I spoke from my own kind of subjective standpoint. Yeah, but I mean, listen, things are there. It's, one has to see them and read them. We must be learning, and we must also acknowledge that we have to learn. Okay, so it's not bad. I mean, but don't justify it and don't apologize. I mean, it means kind of deep reflection, yeah? That's what I think. Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, this guideline is still kind of updated, and it could have been written yesterday. So in that sense, it's well done, but it's a pity. Anyway, Liliana Ruha, we finished with you too. In fact, I mean, yeah, you'll be closing the streaming. I think that Ruha has, well, she's gifted us coming, but we have a gift for her because it's sharing this discussion. It's great.
So should I just okay. Yeah, I really appreciated the exchange and conversation. That's what I came for. And I do recognize the dynamic of having an outsider come in to represent certain ideas that they're already flourishing here. And so in a longer version, if I was giving a solo talk, I would really emphasize that no matter where in the world we are, the histories and the social dynamics of that place are getting encoded into the digital systems, which means we need to listen to the local scholars and organizers that have their pulse on the ground in that locale. And fortunately, everywhere that I go, there are people there that are already thinking through these ideas and applying them, including those that are here in this room. And it's really behooves all of us to listen and learn from those. Yes, take in some things from other places. Unfortunately, the imperialism of the US also means imperialism of our scholarship too, that it gets exported everywhere and often takes the place of the homegrown knowledges that are closer to the reality on the ground. So I think this exchange just reminds us, and if I had my slides with me, I would be able to show you the many different initiatives, organizations from so many different parts of the world that are thinking about digital casteism in India, the way that Japanese of Korean descent are treated like second-class citizens, the way that in somewhere like Brazil that thinks itself as like a multicultural democracy, Afro-Brazilians will give you a much more accurate reading of the reality. You go place to place, and the common theme is that those who experience the underside of that society, who have to navigate the landmines in order to survive, they have more knowledge of what's actually happening than the people who are benefiting, and definitely outsiders as well. So this, I think, conversation is a reminder to value the knowledge and the insights and the organizing that's happening in our own backyard, not only those that are flying in for a few days. All right? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
But I also want to fly in again for a few days, so don't forget about me. I'll be back in November, so.
We will then we'll see you again in November. So, thank you so much, Ruha. Gracias a todas las personas que heu vingut.
Thank you to all those of you coming here. I wanted to close this session today taking a quote of Toni Morrison in Ruha's book, "Dream a little bit before you think," right? But after what's been happening, I think that this has become a learning session for all of us. So thank you to the Bofill Foundation for opening up this experimental encounter. It wasn't set to be, a sophisticated kind of you learn ABC, but rather, and it's been the magic of the seminar. I mean, thanks for being here. Thanks for explaining. Thanks for participating. This has become something great. So yeah, this was a space generated for revision, for revisiting, and for reflecting. I mean, as I said, the more I read, the more I learn. Well, the more ignorant I feel, I have to admit. So yes, I'm a learner of anti-racism. But the message I take home from today is that this has been magic, and the commitment is here to keep on reviewing my privilege. What I didn't know up till now, I didn't know. But now that I know I didn't know, I can't remain the same. So I'll invite you all, please, take this commitment from here, okay, from this afternoon's great conversation. And whoever wants to continue to explore this in a collective manner, I'm ready to start a WhatsApp group to keep on experimenting and learning together. So please, let's do it, because on our own, it might be more difficult. Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye.